The One Ring was not lost by accident. It was lost in a massacre, an act of calculated slaughter that would condemn Middle-earth to 3,000 years of gathering darkness and fear. This was not a glorious battle of legend, fought beneath the banners of kings and remembered in soaring verse. This was a brutal, desperate butchery in a swamp, a tragedy born of pride and a single, fatal miscalculation. The fall of Boromir, a hero's death defending the innocent, is but a faint echo of this original sin. For this was the moment the greatest prize of the War of the Last Alliance was cast away in mud and blood, sealing the fate of the world. This is the dark chronicle of the disaster of the Gladden Fields. It began, as so many tragedies do, in the shadow of a great victory. The year was 2 of the Third Age. Sauron the Deceiver was vanquished, his physical form destroyed upon the slopes of Mount Doom. The Dark Tower of Barad-dûr had been leveled, its foundations broken. The War of the Last Alliance, a conflict that had consumed the lives of countless elves and men, was finally over. The price had been astronomical. Gil-galad, the High King of the Noldor, was dead. So too was Elendil the Tall, the first High King of Arnor and Gondor. But his son, Isildur, survived. And it was Isildur who had cut the ruling ring from Sauron's very hand. He was now the High King of all the Dúnedain, master of the twin realms of Gondor in the south and Arnor in the north. For 2 years he remained in the south, working to restore order to the fledgling kingdom of Gondor, entrusting its rule to the son of his brother Meneldil. He gave counsel, established its borders, and planted a seedling of the White Tree in Minas Anor in memory of his slain father. Yet his heart was in the north, in his own city of Annúminas, and with the shards of his father's legendary sword, Narsil. His work in the south was done. It was time to go home. The journey was to be over 1,000 miles, a great march from the heart of Gondor to the city of Imladris, where Isildur's wife and youngest son, Valandil, awaited him. There, he would deliver the shards of Narsil to the care of Elrond, and finally seek the Master of Rivendell's counsel on a matter that had grown heavy on his soul, the fate of the One Ring. Both Elrond and Círdan the Shipwright, the wisest of the Eldar left in Middle-earth, had begged him to destroy it in the fires of Orodruin where it was forged. But Isildur refused. The ring was beautiful, and his. More than that, it was a weregild, a blood price for the deaths of his father and his brother Anarion. His pride, the great failing of the men of Númenor, would not allow him to cast it away. So he claimed it as an heirloom of his house, a monument to a hard-won victory. He did not know he was carrying his own doom. His company was small, but it was the finest in the world. 200 knights of the Dúnedain, veterans of the siege of Barad-dûr, every one a lordly warrior of Númenorian blood. With him rode his 3 eldest sons, who had fought bravely by his side throughout the war. Elendil, the eldest, wise and thoughtful, who most resembled his noble grandfather, Elendil. Then there was Aratan and Cirion, his younger brothers, both eager and proud warriors. They were marching home in triumph, guardians of their king and the ultimate spoil of war. They felt invincible. No enemy remained in Middle-earth, they believed, that could possibly stand against them. For many days they rode north along the banks of the great river Anduin. The lands were wild, but empty. They passed the Brownlands, still desolate and scorched from the war against Sauron centuries before. As they neared the marshy delta where the river Gladden flowed out of the mountains, the land grew dim and misty. It was the 38th day of their journey. The sun began to set, staining the western clouds a deep, foreboding red. The air grew heavy, and a sense of unease settled upon the company. But how could a remnant of a shattered army, a scattered tribe of orcs, possibly pose a threat to the High King of Middle-earth? They did not know they were being watched. The orcs of the Misty Mountains, though their master was gone, still burned with a furious hatred for the heirs of Elendil. Their spies had marked the king's small company, and word had spread like wildfire through the goblin tunnels and mountain holds. A great host, many thousands strong, had descended from the mountains with unnatural speed, driven by a singular, burning purpose: vengeance. They knew the king was there, and they had laid a perfect trap in the fading light of day. The attack came with shocking suddenness. As dusk turned to true night, the Dúnedain were caught in the open, far from any defensible position. From the eastern hillsides, the ambush was sprung. A hideous roar went up, and the main body of the orc host charged down upon them, a wave of black iron and jagged blades. The Dúnedain were outnumbered at least 10 to 1, perhaps more. Panic was not in their nature. Instantly, the veterans formed up. Isildur dismounted, commanding his men to form a shield wall, a ring of steel and courage against the coming tide. He stood in the center with his sons, his face grim. He was a warrior king, the victor of the greatest war of the age. He had faced down the Dark Lord himself. This rabble of orcs was an insult, not a mortal threat. He looked to his eldest son, Isildur, whose face was pale in the gloom. Unlike his father, Isildur saw the truth of their situation. "My lord," Isildur said, his voice steady despite the din. "The ring is their target. The malice of Sauron is in all his creatures, and it will drive them to possess it. We are hopelessly outnumbered. We must try to break out." But Isildur's pride was a mountain. He had not fled from Mordor. He would not flee now. "We have faced worse odds than this," the king declared, his voice ringing over the clash of steel. "Stand firm. Hold the line." The first assault was furious. The orcs, howling and ravenous, crashed against the shield wall. The discipline of the Dunedain held. Their long swords rose and fell, their spears pierced foul flesh, and the line did not break. Black blood slicked the marshy ground. For a time, it seemed the king's confidence was justified. The valor of the men of the West was a thing of legend, and they sold their lives dearly, felling 5 orcs or more for every one of their own who fell. But the orcs were relentless. They scrambled over the bodies of their own dead, a seemingly endless supply of hatred and fury. The first wave recoiled, leaving mounds of their dead ringing the beleaguered Dunedain. There was a pause, a moment for the outnumbered warriors to catch their breath. And in that moment, a new set of horns blared, not from the east, but from the west. From the direction of the river, another great host of orcs, held in reserve, now charged forth, cutting off any chance of retreat. The trap was complete. They were surrounded. Annihilation was now a certainty. Isildur's heart went cold. He had made a catastrophic error. His pride had doomed them all. He saw it in an instant. There was no escape. There was no victory to be had, only an honorable death. His gaze fell upon his sons, standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces grim, their swords ready. Erotan and Cirion were fierce, their eyes burning with battle fury. But Isildur looked only at his father, his expression not of anger, but of sorrow and understanding. In that look, Isildur's heart broke. He had led his children into a slaughterhouse. The second assault was a storm of death. The orcs pressed in from all sides, a suffocating tide. Cirion, his youngest son present, was the first of the royal line to fall, pierced by a half-dozen spears as he defended his father's flank. Shortly after, Arakantan, fighting back-to-back with his brother Isildur, was overwhelmed and slain, his life cut short in a spray of blood and a final, defiant cry. 2 sons, gone. The shield wall began to crumble, men falling too quickly to be replaced. The circle was shrinking, the end drawing near. Only Isildur remained. Isildur, now Isildur's heir in truth, stood beside his father. He was the last. He looked upon the king, his eyes full of a terrible clarity. "Father, you must go. Take the ring and go. I will hold them for a moment. It is for you that the enemy searches. You cannot allow it to be recovered." For the briefest of moments, Isildur, the High King, vanished, and only a father remained, horrified at the thought of abandoning his last child. But Elendur's gaze was unyielding. He was not a son begging for his life. He was a captain of the Dunedain, giving his last command. "It is the only way," Isildur whispered. "For Gondor, for Arnor, go!" In that instant, the king's pride shattered completely, washed away by a tide of unbearable grief. He had lost everything: his sons, his men, his honor. All that was left was the mission. He clasped his son's arm one last time, a silent, agonizing farewell. Then he turned and ran. But here, the story takes a turn that has been debated by scholars for ages. For the escape was too easy. Think about it. A host of thousands of orcs, their senses honed for slaughter, their hatred focused entirely on the king who bore their master's greatest treasure. And yet, he simply ran away? As Isildur plunged into the darkness, away from the flickering torchlight of the battle, the pursuit was strangely inept. Arrows flew, but went wide. Orcs gave chase, but stumbled. Was this merely the fog of war, or was a different power at play? A power nestled on the chain around Isildur's own neck? The Ring of Power had a will of its own. It had been subdued by Isildur's own formidable strength of will. But now, in this moment of utter chaos and despair, its ancient malice began to stir. It had no love for Isildur. It was a part of Sauron, and it yearned only to return to its master. But Sauron was gone, a vanquished spirit. So the ring began to think for itself. It needed a new path, and a desperate, fleeing king was not part of its plan. Behind him, Isildur and the last of his guard made their final stand. Their fight was hopeless. But every orc they cut down, every second they bought, was a gift to their fleeing king. Their sacrifice was immense, a final, defiant blaze of Númenórean valor against the encroaching darkness. Isildur did not look back. He couldn't. The cost was too high. He ran, stripping off his heavy armor as he went, casting aside his glorious helmet, his royal gorget, piece by piece, until only his sword and the clothes on his back remained. He was no longer a king. He was a survivor. His goal was the river, the great river Anduin, a current so powerful it could carry him far from this land of death. He reached its banks, his lungs burning, his heart a stone of grief in his chest. Without a second thought, he waded into the freezing water. The shock of the cold was breathtaking, but it was nothing compared to the chill of his loss. He held his sword high for a moment, the legendary Narsil, before letting it sink into the murky depths, lost to the world. And then, he did the one thing he believed would save him. He took the Ring of Power and placed it upon his finger, and the world vanished. To the orcs gathering on the riverbank, their prey had simply disappeared in mid-stroke. They screeched in frustration, firing arrows blindly into the dark water, but their target was gone, cloaked by the ring's power. Isildur was now a ghost in the water, invisible, untouchable. He was safe, or so he thought. The current was strong, far stronger than he anticipated, and the water was unnervingly cold, sapping the strength from his limbs. But a greater weight was upon him. The ring, on his finger, it felt different. Not just cold, but utterly alien. It seemed to grow heavy, impossibly heavy. A band of lead dragging him down, pulling him away from the far bank, towards the deeper, faster channel. But it wasn't just weight, it was a feeling, a malevolent pressure, a sudden, chilling sense of betrayal. And then, the unthinkable happened. In the middle of the raging river, with safety a stone's throw away, the ring made its move. It had waited for the perfect moment, not on the battlefield, where it might be found by a Dúnedain survivor, not on the riverbank, where an orc might claim it, but here, in the deep, silty waters of the Anduin, where it could slip away, unnoticed, and wait for a new master, a new time. It swelled on his finger. It became slick, like wet stone. The ring that had refused to leave his hand in the fires of Mount Doom, the ring he had claimed as his own, now abandoned him. It slipped free. In an instant, the invisibility was gone. Isildur reappeared, floundering in the dark water, his face a mask of pure shock and disbelief. He was exposed. He was mortal. The waterlogged clothes dragged him down. The current pulled him under. He broke the surface, gasping for air, his eyes wide with the sudden, horrifying understanding of what had just occurred. He had been betrayed by the ring itself, and his enemies saw him. A sharp cry went up from the eastern bank. An orc sentry had spotted him, a pale shape in the dark water. In a moment, a dozen archers were there, their crude bows drawn taut. Isildur looked towards them. No longer a king, no longer a warrior, just a man, alone and doomed. He saw the bows bend. He saw the glint of the arrowheads. In his final moment, Isildur felt no fear, only a profound and chilling irony. He who had stood before the might of Sauron, who had wielded the hilt shard of Narsil to cut the ring from the Dark Lord's hand, was to be ended here, by a volley of crude orc arrows in a lonely river. Time seemed to slow. He did not think of his kingdom, or his victory. He thought of his sons, Elendur, Aratan, and Sirion, their faces ghostly in his mind's eye, waiting for him on a shore he would now never reach. He took one last, ragged breath. The arrows struck true. One pierced his throat, silencing the cry of a king forever. Another tore through his heart. A brutal, definitive end. The strength fled his limbs. The fight left his eyes, which were fixed on the cold, uncaring stars above. The great king of the Dúnedain was no more. His body, a vessel of grief and broken pride, surrendered to the river's relentless pull, sinking into the cold, dark silence below. But far below him, the true victor of this day completed its own journey. The Ring of Power, the cause of all this ruin, tumbled through the murky water. It was free. It cared nothing for the king it had abandoned, nor for the world of men it had helped to shatter. It sought only the depths, the silt, the long, quiet darkness where it could wait. On the bank, the orcs gave a ragged cheer, their duty done. They did not search for the body. To them, it was just another man slain, another enemy removed. They had no idea of the history they had just ended, or the far more terrible history they had allowed to begin anew. They turned and melted back into the darkness, leaving the river to its secrets. And so the second age of the world ended, not in a blaze of glory, but in a quiet, ignominious death in the dark. Isildur's line would endure, but his mistake would haunt it. For the ring, the instrument of Sauron, was not unmade. It lay hidden, passing out of all knowledge and into legend. Its malice slept, but it did not die. It waited for the day it would be found, to bring ruin to the world once more. A new age had begun, born from the shadow of the old, carrying a seed of darkness that would, in time, blossom again. The tale is ended, but the legend lives on. To witness the dawn of the Third Age and the shadow that is to come, subscribe to the Silmarillion Chronicles and never miss a chapter of